All right, everybody, we are live, and we want to welcome you to this sprint on the topic of subject to existing mortgage. It's also, taught or talked about creative finance. It's one strategy, one acquisition strategy that falls in our three-pillar process to actually build a house buying machine. All right. So all of the resources that I'm going to be talking about are going to be inside of our machines community. All right, so make sure you check those out. And the way that we like to do these sprints, we're going to start at the 10,000 foot level. Whether you're new or you're active or you've done some of these deals, you're probably going to get something out of this sprint. And because we're going to be not only explaining the theory, the what, the why, but then we're going to be doing another session, right, on the how to actually do it. You'll be seeing me actively calling, making offers, getting a deal live. All right, so with that said, make sure to refer back to our 9-step roadmap. This is essentially part of the conversion engine, right? This is just one of the strategies, right? This is just one of the strategies around being able to get deals. And why this is important is because we don't want to get shiny object syndrome, okay? We want to be focused as to what we do. And this is one way to acquire real estate where the debt is already secured by the seller, right? By the seller. All right, so let's kind of go through the agenda. I have some notes here. All right, so first question and first point in the agenda is, what is the subject to mortgage purchase and sale? All right, so what does that look like? Well, let me draw you real quick a diagram that hopefully brings the point home. Okay, so let's say that you have a house, right? Like there's a house here. Draw a house, right? That's a house, right? And so the way that we get ownership for that house is what they call a deed, right? A deed. A deed. I'm just writing that down here. A deed. And so if you were to buy a house, right, you can bring your own cash, you could get a loan, or you could leave the existing debt in place and take ownership of the house. Okay, so I'll go step back a second. We have a house, we have a deed, right? And to that house, to that deed, there could also be debt. There could or could not be, right? And let's say that this is Mr. Seller, right? Mr. Seller, he's holding his real estate sign up saying for sale. And then way over here, there's you as the investor, right? Saying, hey, I want to buy the house, right? Use an investor. Hey, I buy houses, right? I buy houses. And since you buy houses, what are your options to buy that house, to get ownership of that deed, right? One, you can have a bag of cash, so that's one option. Bag of cash, right? Kind of exaggerating, but you know what I mean. You could get a loan, right? You could get a loan, and this could be a hard money loan. This could be a private money loan. This could be a traditional mortgage, right? Traditional mortgage. But then the third option, which is what we're going to be focusing on today, the third option is to essentially use the existing debt. Leaving that debt in place. And so what happens in this transaction, okay, I'm going to write up here a purchase and sales agreement. There's a purchase and sales agreement that says, yes, Mr. Investor, I will go ahead and deed you the property to you, right? This seller right here will deed over the property, the ownership, the titleship of that property to the investor. and I'm going to leave this debt in place. I'm going to leave that debt in place, that mortgage, that note. This is also known as note with a deed of trust. Okay? So you must be saying, well, what would make a seller do that? Doesn't the bank have to sign off on it? All these things. So the answer is there's many reasons why sellers, we're going to jump into that. There's many reasons why sellers that need and want to sell the house are not able to get a buyer that can qualify for financing or has the cash. And so this is an additional way for them to be able to sell the property, right? Sell the property. So ownership is transferred, debt is left in place. That is subject to the existing mortgage purchase, right? The ownership is transferred, but the debt is left in place. Okay? With me so far? Good. Okay, so with that said, the purchase and sales agreement, what it writes up is it shows the conditions, right? And so the condition is you'll have the deed, investor, you will have the deed of the house as long as you make the payments subject to the existing mortgage. Okay? Subject to the existing mortgage. So this debt does not, it does not get canceled. It doesn't go away. It stays in place. Okay? That's why, debt is separate from the deed. You've got those two separately. They're not one and the same. Okay? They're not one and the same. They're separate. The deed is separate from the debt. All right? So what we're doing is we're leaving the existing debt. This is what we're going to be talking about. We're leaving the existing debt, okay, in place and transferring ownership. And the purchase and sales agreement is what states that. So we're going to be diving deep into that in this sprint. All right? So that is what a subject to mortgage purchase and sale is. All right? Nothing more, nothing less. All right? What is the difference between subject to and assuming the mortgage? Okay, that's a good question. So the difference is this debt, buying the property subject to the existing mortgage, this debt is still under Mr. Seller's name. This debt is not under Mr. Investor's name. Okay? This debt will show up in the credit report. So if you go to Mr. Seller's credit report, that debt is going to show mortgage, blah, 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 owes, let's say 100K. Okay? That debt is going to, so if payments are not made, it's going to ding his credit report. If the house, if the payments are not made, and there's ways to protect the seller, we're going to be talking about that. There's legal instruments. But I just want you to understand that the debt stays in the seller's name. So the investor does not have to go through qualification. The investor does not have to go through underwriting. The investor does not have to go through all these steps, fences, brick walls to essentially benefit from the existing debt. The seller is saying, I'll leave the debt on my name in order to sell the property. And with that, I sell my worries, my headaches. I am selling it to you with the condition that you actually make the monthly payments. Okay? When you assume a loan, if it were an assumption, the investor has to be able to get qualified by the bank and assume the liability of the mortgage. Okay? In this case, the investor is assuming the payments, making those payments, but his credit does not get reported on due to that mortgage. Okay? And real quick, a few ways to actually make sure that the seller is protected on this. So how does the, protection for seller? Protection for seller. So what are some of the ways that we can protect the seller? Well, one, we use a third party note servicing company. Okay? We'll be talking inside of the machines community, some of the ones that are out there that are investor friendly. Okay? So when you use a third-party note servicing company, if you ever have a mortgage or a credit card bill or whatever, you get monthly statements, and this third-party note servicing company makes sure that the money is withdrawn from the investor's bank account and it's getting paid directly to the mortgage company, okay? Directly to the mortgage company. Not the seller. The money doesn't go from the investor to the seller and then the seller pays it to the mortgage. No, 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 no. No, you don't want to do that. You want to set up a third-party note servicing company. Cost for that initial cost maybe $100 and then like $35 per month or something like that. And also, it helps the seller because it shows track record of paying that debt down. And if they go and want to actually get another mortgage, that's record keeping that the underwriters for their new mortgage may be able to use. Okay? Now, this is not legal or financial advice. I'm just explaining to you guys. I got to make my disclaimer. I'm explaining to you guys all this for entertainment purposes only. Okay? Now, the second piece that they can be protected is through the warranty deed. Warranty deed, legal instruments. Now, if there's one takeaway from this sprint, that I want you to have, is that transactions, legalities, codes, laws around mortgages change. Okay? They do change. And so I want you to understand the concept and how we actually execute it from our side as the investors. But we're not trying to be attorneys. Okay? And so even though I may be able to show you a real case scenario, a bunch of real case scenarios, the one thing you want to do is you want to get in touch with an attorney that's in the market that you're actively looking or are doing deals, and get with them as to what paperwork they need for you to fill out. And I'm going to give you examples as to what we use, obviously. But what I found actually doing the business is that depending on the company that you are working with, the attorney office, the title office, they're going to be requiring different paperwork and maybe some updated laws. Like in Texas, there's been some updated laws, some updated disclosures. And so we're going to be able to get you through, hey, what is needed as an investor to understand the concept and actually get a property under contract. But I advise you to go ahead and start conversations. And you can go to a local REI meetup, and I'll be sharing some of the resources that we have so you can network a little bit and build that relationship with that office. Because once you get a deal, you want to get it closed. You don't want to be jumping through different title companies. Ask me how I know. That's how I know. Okay? So with that said, we're clear that the deed gets transferred to the investor, the debt stays in place, the mortgage payments get done by a third-party servicing company, and there is a warranty deed or legal instruments that protect the seller. All right? So if you do this right, if you use attorneys and people that specialize, and we're going to go through the process in the machines community, right? You're going to be able to see that the sellers are well protected. Now, what is the alternative for a seller, right? What is the alternative? Keep a house empty, it being a money pit, right? Like, that doesn't make sense. And unfortunately, we have to help other people get educated on these strategies, because if not, you're just going to see a lot of houses just rot away, right? Because nobody's able to qualify for a mortgage, people don't have enough cash to buy them. And so we don't need to let the fear of just not understanding how this all works let us as a community not do deals, okay? So what are the risks associated with a subject to mortgage sale to the seller? Well, if a subject to mortgage sale is done without a third-party servicing note, without a warranty deed and a legal instrument that actually protects the seller in the case that that investor or that buyer does not make the payments, or like in the case of Texas, the proper disclosures are not done, there's a couple of risks. One, obviously, the payments don't get made, the mortgage company is going to foreclose on the house, okay? So that's obviously a risk. Not only that, their credit is going to get damaged, right? Okay? The other piece is if they don't have the proper legal instruments, they're not going to be able to actually act upon getting that house back so that they can essentially claim that property back and not have to push it to foreclosure. Okay? The other piece is if you don't have the right disclosures and legalities in place, that transaction could be null and void. So let's say that you as an investor, you purchased the property subject to the existing mortgage. You spent $30,000, $40,000 into the repairs and maybe making the house an Airbnb, a midterm corporate rental, or renting by the room, however money you did. If you didn't do this paperwork right, the issue is that that purchase and sales agreement, that transaction, that closing could be null and void. All right. And so again, my biggest takeaway for y'all is to make sure that you're working with an attorney that understands creative financing closing. Okay. And that you and the seller are protected in all ways. Okay. The other risk that we haven't talked about is what they call the due on sale clause. Very simply stated, a due on sale clause states that a mortgage company has the right, not the obligation, they don't have to, but has the right to call the loan due. So typically what would happen is, let's say that a mortgage company sees that Mr. Seller sold to Mr. Investor, okay? Mr. Seller sold to an investor and the debt was not paid off. So the mortgage company may see this and they may decide, it's an option, it's not an obligation. They may decide, hey, Mr. Seller, I see that you sold it to Mr. Investor and you haven't paid us off. We are going to go ahead and act upon our right to accelerate the loan and essentially be able to foreclose. And so that's probably like a 90 to 120 day process, right? Depending on the state and the foreclosure process. But they have the right to accelerate the loan. Okay, so one of a couple things, can be done, right? So that investor, could eventually get another loan to pay them off. All right, they could get another loan to pay it off, or they could just sell the property. Okay, now what I would say is typically when a due on sale clause is called upon is because maybe the insurance is not set up right, the insurance premiums are not set up right, the investor or end buyer essentially did not keep up with taxes or insurance. And if that's not happening, that raises a red flag to the mortgage company, which typically forces them to accelerate the loan, okay? Which, that forces them to do that, okay? So that's why you want to get your paperwork set up correctly and keep on top of the insurance, of the taxes, of anything that's escrow, so that red flag is essentially not raised. And one key tip, one key trick that I've seen and that I've done is whenever we actually take a property subject to, we use a serious LLC and we name it kind of after the house. Because if you think about it, you could very well change your own personal residence to a trust, to an LLC. You could do that. You could very much well do that. It doesn't have to be like an arm's length person. You can actually do that. And that's a different entity, right? Maybe you're doing it for legal reasons, right? You want to stay anonymous, okay, in terms of who owns the house. And so with that said, those are some of the risks involved with the seller. And so those need to be disclosed, right? And as long as you're keeping up with taxes, insurance, and the proper paperwork and disclosures, and getting power of attorneys, which we're going to be talking about, then it's very unlikely that it will happen because again, they have the right, they don't necessarily have the obligation to accelerate the loan. As long as the payments are being made, typically they really don't care. Okay, what are the benefits of a seller on a subject to mortgage sale? Okay, so a couple of benefits. Essentially, the highest benefit for the seller is one, being able to relieve themselves from the liability and the burden of a property that they are stuck on, and essentially debt relief, right? They're not having to make those payments anymore. And so we're going to be talking about this in the actual how-to execution section of the sprint. But most of our motivated sellers that we end up doing subject to is because they're either overwhelmed with repairs and the monthly payments, or they have tried listing it and they're like an expired listing and they just they've kind of run out of options, right? Typically, most people want to sell cash straight out, but for those that are actually hunting for deals, it's probably because the house has been on the market, it expired, they're kind of running out of options, or they're overwhelmed with the amount of repairs and the debt, and they just want that headache to be gone, right? That headache to be gone. So that's one of the main benefits for the sellers, debt relief for sure. Okay, so let's see, what benefits you as the investor in a subject to mortgage sale? Well, simply stated, the debt is already in place. You don't have to go out and qualify, be underwritten, do conferences, raise private money. That debt is already secured against the house. And so typically with a subject to, especially if it has no equity or negative equity, it's about cash flow. It's not about equity, it's about cash flow. So I've already have my fixed costs. How can I make this house or this real estate property produce so that I can actually squeeze a profit, if that makes sense, all right? So as an investor, your biggest benefit is that the debt is already secured, okay? You don't have to qualify for one, all right? So how to find subject to mortgage properties. Okay, so, we're gonna talk about finding and attracting, okay? So to find them, to actually actively find them, what we're doing is we're going on properties that are on market and that they have been listed 90 days or more, okay, 90 days or more. And essentially, we find that the most profitable deals are deals that could be rented in a creative way. So renting by the room, maybe like a corporate rental. And so if they don't have an HOA, it's actually a good thing because the HOA is not breathing under your neck. Not saying that we're totally against HOA properties, homeowners associations, but if we were to have a preference, we want to target houses that have been listed on the market for more than 90 days or that have expired. Okay, so if we're actually going into the hunt, right? If we're actually going into the hunt, we want properties, we will go fishing on properties that have been listed for more than 90 days or that haven't been expired. And the funny thing is, once you find a property that's been listed for more than 90 days, at that point, the listing agent knows that, hey, I'm probably going to get fired from this listing, because typically real estate agent listing agreements, they're good for 6 months, right? If they don't get a sale, if they don't bring a solution. And so, probably 90% of the work here is actually educating and building a relationship with that listing agent. Now, I will advise you and forewarn you that a lot of them are not even going to want to respond to your inquiry in your email. And we're going to be talking about how to actually get them to respond to you, okay? And actually provide your offer in writing. Because if you provide it in writing, they have to present it, right? They have to present that option to their client, to their seller. So 90% of the work really is showing up and educating, okay? So if it's been listed for more than 90 days, that's definitely kind of early in the game. You can go as early as you want, but at least to start off, they've been listed for more than 90 days. And you want to follow up all the way through expiring, because once it expires, we want to go ahead and make sure that we are following up with that seller. Think about it. They raised their hand and they said, hey, I want to sell. They go through the process of listing and they didn't get a sale. Now what? They still are stuck with a house that they don't want, okay? So a good way to find deals that actually proactively do some prospecting and actually find deals without any ad spend is houses that have been listed for more than 90 days or that are expired. And we're not going to give up on the first call or the second call, or even if the listing agent doesn't respond. First we try with the agent, then we're going to go essentially to the seller so that they know that this option is. Many of the deals that we have done are people that have tried to list. The agents never brought this opportunity to them so that they can get debt relief and remove themselves from the burden of actually owning a house that they don't want to own anymore. And so, unfortunately, if you are in real estate, we're in the real estate solutions business, right? And you're a one-trick pony that only knows how to list, you're ill-equipped to, and this is for mainly for my agents out there that bash real estate investors, right? You're ill-equipped to help your sellers, right? If you're a wholesaler that only knows how to wholesale low-ball cash offer type of deals, then you're not gonna make the ROI that you need to out of your lead gen or out of your business. Okay. So with that said, that's how we find. Now, how do we attract? How do we attract subject to properties? No different that we attract any motivated seller. We actually get inbound lead generation campaigns mainly through search engines like Google pay-per-click, Bing. I think I find that those are the fastest way to get people that are raising their hand and want to sell now. After that, then maybe you can try some offline that's slower but brings in ideal properties, like direct mail. But in terms of actually bringing in and attracting high intent motivated sellers, inbound search engines like Google pay-per-click, ads, Bing, those things are the ones that bring motivated sellers that actually want to sell now. Okay. So we're going to be talking around example contracts. So here's some of the things. Again, if you're part of our community, machines community, you'll be able to get all these. So we're going to be going over the release of information, limited power of attorney. Okay. We're going to be going over what a special warranty deed looks like. Okay. So we're going to be going over that. Let's see here. What else? We got a bunch of documents that we're going to be going over, and I'm actually going to be showing you the first subject to deal that I did back in 2014. We're going to be going over a transaction checklist, one of the attorney offices that I use that's really good, that I think you can use as a go-by. And we're going to be going over the agreement for purchase and sale subject to, kind of what that looks like. This is one of the most simplified ones that I've found and I've seen. And then I'm actually going to be giving you an example of a deal that I did, that I sold. The first deal that I did, I sold, I don't know if you can see that, but we ended up selling for about 15K in revenue. And I was so nervous on that deal, so nervous. So let me give you a quick story. So seller calls back. I think that was probably a direct mail postcard. So she calls back, and she already had moved out of the house. The house had foundation issues. She was overwhelmed. She already had relocated to Mississippi, and she had no other options. And I said, well, I can take over the payments, and I'll see about either fixing and selling it or renting it. And I ended up listing it on the house, cleaning it, listing it as is, and a fund purchased the house. And I was so nervous because it was like, I need to get, now I'm the motivated seller. I want to get rid out of this house. And I ended up putting bandit signs all around the neighborhood. I mean, I'm talking about 100 bandit signs with the actual address of the property. And the house was listed on the multiple listing service with an agent. So the agent blows my phone up, is like, hey, I'm getting all these calls, all these bandit signs. You're going to get my license revoked. And, I'm running over there like a chicken with its head caught off, removing these signs, because I didn't know that on a bandit sign you shouldn't really put the address. So, because at least that area, they're not really kosher. They're frowned upon. So essentially, that's a little bit of a chuckle for you there. But okay, so this is kind of like the overview, kind of like the 10,000 foot view. Now I'm gonna move on, and we're gonna actually do an over the shoulder, right, on actually making offers on a subject to creative finance deal. All right, see you guys on the next video.